Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prime Declassified Podcast. I am your host today, Eve Howard, and today I have Michael Kopf, who's I was on his show a couple of weeks ago, and so I invited him on mine because that's how we roll. But anyway, Michael, welcome. We were just having this amazing conversation. He's like, "Why aren't we recording this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot." So we could just kind of pick up, but we were kind of like talking about um noticing others that are like us, in like everyday life, at our jobs, um at the store, you know and just general and passing, and notice people like us, people with abilities. I said, like, one of the things that I noticed like right away was like, I noticed the trauma, like it shows up around the eyes. And then from there, there'll be some scarring, like right here. And that's usually from like electroshock therapy that they use, to like mind wipe us. So, and then after that, I'll notice like empath, and then, somebody who dreams, it becomes very vivid to me. I start seeing things very vividly. So, Michael, what are some of the things that you recognize? Like, not, in the here and now, and then, when you're out.
Things that I recognized was something I had discounted from my childhood and just thought was vivid imagination was I would draw where kids normally draw like pictures of birds or flowers or meadows or trees. I would draw a mountain that was like three tiered, that had planes in it, vehicles in it, but there's no entrance or exit. And so I'm like, why am I? And it's like I would finish drawing and I'd be like, well, that's a really cool military base, but I don't know how you could use it. But, well, vivid imagination. I'm like, I didn't even see this on a TV show. So it like literally was something that bled into my mind. And I just was like, well, I have no idea what this is. So fast forward, and I was talking with our team Raw about it, and he goes, "Oh, well, that's because they used the Stargate in there and the portal, and that's why they don't need the door, and those do exist." And my mind was like, "Wait, you mean I was in this for real?" And that was like my first moment of awakening of going, "Wow, this is real." And then it started making sense where when I was growing up, you know how like people will, and I know guys do it more than women, and don't know why we do it, but the occasional like you get something and you got to spit it out. I would be very cautious where would spit out because I was like, I didn't want the government to get my DNA. I was worried about that. I didn't want to get hurt because I was worried I would be put on a table, become an experiment. And I'm like growing up with this, and I'm thinking this is just weird. I don't know why I have this, but yeah. And then I was sharing with you before, a few minutes ago, like I had like moments where I would find myself and I would go, okay, I'm in a room, there are people around me, and I use energy or psionics to diffuse the weapons and hand-to-hand combat to drop them. And then I'm like, okay, still got it. I'm like, don't know what I got, but I got it. And realizing now these are all bleed throughs from the programs and how I really have been in the programs. And we were, as you were commenting about the scarring, I was like, yeah, I got a spot right now that's really tender and everything. So I feel like I must have recently done a 20 and back.
I think for a while there I was doing quite a few, um, which was really weird. I think it was like 90, I'm gonna say 93. And all of a sudden I remember just like coming to, and I'm laying on the ground outside my apartment, and I'm laying there and it's dark, and I kind of get up and I realize I'm hurt. And I look at my hand and it's like twisted and broken, a- and I can't see out of my left eye. And I was just, I- there's nothing worse than just not knowing what happened. Um, and like the first thing I thought of was I was taken and just left like this. And I guess my mind went to more than just, human kidnappers. It went further than that, and I think when I look back at that, I think that would have been like I was doing quite a few at that time. But um it took me almost a week before what happened had come back to me, but it was almost like a screen memory. And there was like kind of, I don't know if it was like me telling myself this or like a guide or something, but it was like, if it's something, if you remember what happens after the fact of it happening, that could be a screen memory, you know, um, but if you remember it happening and then something happens, but you still remember it, happening as such, and other people remember it too, then that's probably not a screen memory. But I don't know. Everything is so subjective when it comes to this because, I mean, I've experienced it, I mean, seeing um like a tall gray when I was 3, and my sisters seeing it and me interacting and smiling at each other, and me remembering everything except for when I look, where the gray would be, it's like it's wiped, just like digitally cleaned. But I remember everything, all the details. Like, because it was a beach. So I remember like the tiny, tiny white shells that were just perfect, and some of them that were broken. And the sand, some of it was glittery. There were hollow reeds on the sand. And I mean, it was just like I remember everything, what the sky looked like, clouds. There weren't that many, but there was a couple. And but I can't remember that. But I've had, my sister fill in, some of the blank spots. And I realized that it started when I was young, um, at least by age 3 was when they made first contact. And then I was expected to, learn like in almost like an interactive classroom after I would go to sleep. So, I mean, I felt like I never got enough sleep. I was constantly struggling, you know, to learn, whatever they were teaching me, and then go to school and sit in a desk and learn what they're teaching me, and then come home and I was like so exhausted. And that's all I really remember much of it being, and just being really quiet and reading a lot because I was expected to get good grades. Like if I brought anything home less than a 96, I was, berating myself on the way home because I was expected. I don't know, when I say I was expected, I don't really know who expected it other than, your father or mother. But it was like I was expected to get these good grades. I remember doing like testing, but I don't and I remember having to go to this there was like this corridor down by the between the first grade and the third grade, and you would go down there and there was like were all the like the smart kids that had something wrong with them, but they had kind of pushed us all together, and I don't really remember too much other than they were really mean to the kids that had something wrong with them physically. But it just seems like everything changed at the age of 15 when I moved to Colorado.
That makes sense. And like I was sharing with you, beforehand was, kind of, I guess, an awakening to being in the programs, but not really realizing it was I could not fight anyone in school. It's like any instinct of defending myself to a bully just non-existent. And my parents and I would write it off to, yeah, we were told, fighting doesn't solve anything, don't fight, unless you have to. And then I was like, well, and part of me, I realized later, was knowing how and what I know now, I probably was prevented from fighting because I could have really hurt them. And that was not what was needed in that moment. But yeah, I mean, and I would say one of the perks of being in the program, I mean, yes, the torture and the mind splitting and all that is horrible, but I feel like there are benefits too, and like the empathy, the healing factor where we heal faster. And I've had two occasions to where doctors were like, "Oh, you broke this. It's gonna take, take your time." And within the next visit, I'm like, "Hey, doc, I'm ready to use this. Can we just skip ahead and do this?" And they look at the X-rays and are like, "Well, I'm actually surprised at how well the bone is healed up, but let's not push it. Let's, keep it in this for a while." And one of the ones that was funny was I had shared with you that I had fractured my right arm right before the growth plate. So it was in a hard cast, and they were like, "Don't use it, don't get it wet or anything." And I was like, "Well, that's my writing hand. I have to use it." So I've learned how to write with the cast, how to hold the pen or pencil so I could still write. And looking back, I realized I would pick up my backpack full of books with my right arm and carry it on my shoulder. I would still totally use my right arm, even though they were like, "Don't." And it's frustrating. And I don't know if you had this too, but to me, it gets frustrating when you're like, "I can use this. Why are you telling me not to use it?" And being like, "I want it back. Give it back."
I did that. It was like after I um, you know, fallen from wherever I had fallen and I fractured my orbital from my left side of my face. And in my left hand was totally crushed. Like they couldn't even set it. I mean, it sits really weird. It's not supposed to do that. But
Like that.
and I don't bruise. Yeah, I don't bruise. I mean, I remember this guy was going crazy one time. We were all, I mean, a bunch of my friends, my girlfriends, we were at this bar, let's call it after, it was a college bar, and he came up and he like punched my girlfriend, my friend, my sister's best friend in the face. And I had missed it. I must have been out on the dance floor and I came back and he turned around, he punched me in the face too. And it was, either he didn't he hit like he was hitting pillows. Um, but I didn't bruise at all. I had like the very bridge of my nose, there was some light swelling. And I think at the time it was like Star Trek The Next Generation, and one of the aliens had like this thing on the bridge of their nose that kind of like just kind of like pushed out a little bit on each side, and they're like, "Oh, you look like that." And I was like, "Oh, geez." I mean, I mean, I didn't bruise, most people when they get punched between the eyes will have two black eyes, and all the white in their eyes would be blood red. Yeah, so um but yeah, I do remember I was like bullied a lot when I was in, junior high and all through pretty much high school. Um, and I couldn't do anything. Like afterwards, I would be like, oh, I could have did, this, and I would think about all these things and it would be like, the chances of that ever happening, you know, and it would be like, even if it did, I don't think I could do anything. But it was like I learned, well, I think it was when I was about 19, I learned that I was having like severe bleed-throughs of this intense rage. And in that time, if anybody were to come up and it didn't matter how big they were compared to me, at the time I was only like 5'4", um, I'd take them on. And I was just so tiny and very skinny. And they could throw me around, but I would still be fighting with them. But it would have to be like an intense rage that would, it was like it would snap. And then it would be like I would be standing back watching it happen. Like I wasn't in my body. I was watching everything and it was like slow motion. It was very weird. And I think too, before we started recording, we talked about like these certain falls, falling down the stairs, fighting with my sister, landing. I said the landing that would make Stan Lee proud. And how? It has to be muscle memory. It has to be something, that, all the training. And I remember second grade doing training on the playground. I was using like the bars, um, you know, and I was doing it all on my own. Nobody was telling me to do anything. And everybody else would be off playing kickball or doing this or doing that. And I'd be up there by myself. So I think it's just whatever in training in wanting to do something. And this has always been, I've always, if I was told you're not going to make this, but I don't see this happening because, you're falling short in this arena or you're not quite as good in this or something. And I was pushed me really hard to like accomplish that. And I think it was just like in the program too, I was told, if you can, and I have oppositional defiant disorder. So if someone tells me, I'm sorry, you're not going to make this, and be like, oh yeah. I mean, that's just who I am. And a lot of us are like that, because a lot of us have oppositional defiant disorder.
Somebody tells me you can't do that, my answer always is watch me.
Exactly. That is, our MO. That's just how we operate, and uh, you have to wonder if it's something that, they created, within the programming, to push us so hard and then make us push ourselves as well, and
Yeah, and one of the other things too is like when I jokingly will put it as, humanity has a hard time dealing with their emotions. And I'll always say it that way. And I always feel like I, I'm different because my emotions, I can turn them on and off on a switch. Like I'll be happy, and then like the next second I'm angry, and then the next second I'm back to happy. And everyone's like, I don't know how you can switch your emotions like that. And I was at a paranormal convention, and I met this martial artist expert, and I had never met him before and was talking with him. And I was walking by, and somebody goes, "Oh, you had the world record for fastest punch. Can you show us?" And he calls my name over, and he's like, "Hey, can you come here?" And I was like, "Yeah."
mm,
And he goes, "Stand here." And I'm like, "All right." And then he proceeds to start throwing punches at me, but he never connects.
mm,
And when it was over, he like hugged me and he goes into my ear and he says, "I am so impressed. You never flinched. How did you not even move?" And I was like, I innately had a sense he wasn't actually going to hit me. So I didn't feel threatened and just stood there. And I can't help thinking, that's got to be from the programming that, we're kind of dead into reaction and taught, okay, you got to assess before, because we can't blow covers, if we're doing stuff. So I couldn't help but thinking, going, that's a nice effect to have from the programming that we can shut down emotions before emotions take us over.
Yeah, I do notice. I'll get like silent, and everything will slow down, and it's like everything like the background, whatever's going on, it's like that just shuts off immediately. And it's just like I'm able to just fully concentrate on what I'm doing. I I I don't understand any of that either. Um,
No, but and another thing, I found interesting that I think is maybe part of the program is like you brought up Star Trek. And when I would see the crafts or whatever race they were talking about, I would be like, well, yeah, that's pretty close to how they are. But the crafts I would recognize and be like, I've seen that ship before. I wouldn't verbalize it because, how do you tell somebody, oh, yeah, I know that craft, or yeah, I've seen that before. Because it's like, you haven't been in space. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I've been in space. And one of my favorite memories that I told our team, and he was like, he hadn't experienced this. And I don't know if I mentioned it to you when you were on my show, was, and you're gonna like this because we were talking offline about how you have a craft that's here for you. Well, I have one too, and I was on the craft, and there was something coming through a Stargate that wasn't supposed to come. And so I was like in what we call the suit, that we wear and that I've seen in the special programs. And I go, don't arm the weapons. You don't need to arm the weapons. They're like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I got this. I'm like, I haven't been out for a while. I'll take care of this one. And I literally go, no helmet, walk on the ship in space. I mean, the outside of the ship walking. And I get to a certain point and I'm like, okay, this is far enough. Put my hand up and whatever came through, I was like, gone. I just used psionic energy and was like, it's gone. And I was like, and I was thinking, and I started thinking about it, going, I just killed how many people on that ship without a second thought. And then I was like, yeah, but they were warned. So it's not like I just didn't, care about them. It's they were warned and they made their choice. And how many lives were saved because those people were removed? And what impact, in the positive does it have down here that, we're removing these elements? And I started to think, how the world would change if all of the super soldiers, programmees started to wake up, realize they don't need their clone body to do what they can do, and start to make their own choice of you're not going to take any more kids into the program and start to, go after and free the kids, how much the world would change. And we don't even have to physically go. Because we have the ability to go. And I was born with the ability to astral travel. And now I wonder if it's because I was splintered that's was put in there and just something they gave me to be like, hey, I figured out and memorized and learned and was like, all right, you don't have to teach me this and I don't need your permission. I'm going out.
Hmm. Well, you have to wonder, what, I mean, aside from, the obvious reasons why, they fragment or they splinter the soul, I mean, they use them for different reasons, but, I mean, is removing energy like that, or, is energy just energy no matter what? um Removing that, can they, taking, how they take a little piece out, I mean, is that, taking away the strength of our power to use them, like now, or is it the implants? Or, you're saying, well, what proof do we have, um I had my last guest like verified with me. I had noticed it. I was having all these, they look like red dots all over. I have like one right here. I have one on my left eye. I have them on my arms, and I noticed that they would be really close to like two muscle strands, two different ones, like right in between them. And I was talking to her about them, and she's like, "Oh, it was like some person that used to work at like Pine Gap, and they said that those are injection marks. So they're injecting us, whether, we're awake or asleep. And it seems like almost every night, just before I lay down and I'm laying there, it's like my whole head just like starts to like buzz. Like I can feel it. It's almost like a vibrating in my head. I mean, it feels like I'm just like laying there tossing and turning. And I'm like, oh, it's only been like a half hour. And I'll look over and my phone says like 2 hours. But I mean it's just, and I wake up and I'm I can't sleep that long. I can only sleep about 4.5, 5 hours at the most. If I get 6, I get extremely tired. So I need very little to like recharge, but I'm after I think a couple hours of being awake, I'm tired. I want to go back to bed.
I manage I can do four, like you're saying, 4 to 6 hours. If I get 8 hours, I do feel drowsy the next morning. And it's interesting because like I can go to sleep at say 2, maybe 3, wake up at 9 and I'm okay, and go to sleep at 4, wake up at 9 and I'll be like wide awake all day and I'm like surprised I'm still awake and haven't yawned. And I wonder sometimes, do we actually go to sleep doing like a 20 and back, as they call it, where they use us to go do missions and bring us back? Do we count that as our sleep? Or do we like just not even notice it and are like, okay, I slept 4 hours when it may have been 6 hours, and we just don't realize?
Yeah, I don't know. I had this was, I was wearing like this watch that was keeping track of like my light sleep and my deep sleep. And I was like hanging out with some neighbors, we're listening to some music, and neighbor had the drums and just kind of playing drums. They were drinking, I wasn't drinking, but we were like just hanging out. I didn't get back in, and I remember looking at the time. I didn't get back in until like I think it was like 4 in the morning. And after getting ready for bed and everything, it was pretty close to the sun was coming up, and it was about 5. And I woke up and it was 11 o'clock. So 5 to 11, that's only like 6 hours, right? 6 hours at the most, 6 hours. My watch was saying that I slept for 8 hours. that I thought, well, maybe that's just maybe there's something that's malfunctioning, and I kept having really weird things happen. So I was like, I'm like, I'm getting ready for work. I'm running late. I have to quick throw some makeup on and get out the door. And I was like, it'd be really sweet if I could slow down time right now.
I've done that. I've
And
said that.
so I look at my watch and I look at my phone, and they're both the same time. And I start putting my makeup on, and I'm not rushing. I'm just doing it, but I'm concentrating on just deep breathing and just kind of, not putting a whole lot of energy into it, but just putting that energy out there. And I look at the time, and I look at my watch, and I look at the phone, and I'm like, there's just no way. There's no way that that was the right time, because it was the same time that I had looked at before I started putting my makeup on. And I was like, there's just no, I must have made a mistake. And it wouldn't take me like maybe it was the hour I'm missing, and I'm like, no, it doesn't take me an hour to put makeup on. But I was shocked. I'm like, there's no way that that small amount of time to put makeup on a full face and still, you know, I don't know. Um,
What would drive me nuts is I would leave and the GPS unit would say, oh, with traffic, you're going to be like half hour late. So I'm like, anything over 5 minutes, I will call and say, hey, according to GPS, I'll be running late.
mhm.
Every time I call and say, hey, I'm running late, I would arrive a minute ahead of when I was supposed to originally be there. And I'm like, how did I make up so much time? And it's not like I was decided, okay, let's do 100 down the highway, to make up time. I always do the same driving style. And it's like, yeah, and when I don't call, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should call, but when I call, it never works out. And inevitably, I'll be like a couple minutes late when I don't call. And so it's so weird how that works to bending time. And that's actually what I would start to call it is like, okay, I need to bend time. And I realized time is not fixed and so can be manipulated.
Well, it's an illusion, you know.
It
And there are people that are ace at illusions. They you see them all the time down in Vegas. Well, who's to say that it's not something that we're learning? It's something that we know, and it's like ingrained in us, and we're just like pulling this out, and we know how to do this.
Yeah. My favorite when people will say, no, time is natural. I'm like, no, see, I do a show with a couple in the UK, and when we go into daylight savings, they go in a week ahead of us in the US, but then they're 4 weeks behind us going out of daylight savings. So, how is that natural? And on top of that, I did an interview with a lady in Canada on the far eastern coast, I think near Nova Scotia, and their daylight savings or time zone change, they add a half hour onto it. So they're like, oh, if it's 6 o'clock my time, it's 7:30 my time. I'm like, wait, what is this 30 minutes? And they laugh, and she laughs and goes, yeah, we do a half hour in our time change, and I'm like, okay, again, this is not natural. Natural, everybody would do it at the same time, same way. And then you have like Arizona and Indiana that don't
So,
do the time change, which confuses things even more.
yeah, I lived in Phoenix. Believe me, I know it was confusing. And we were also talking about, you were talking about manipulating time, but what about lost time? I mean, just talking about Phoenix, I actually had a memory of lost time, and it was the spring of 97. And that was like during the Phoenix lights. Like I had like a whole thing of just lost time. And finally when I like woke up, I was like in this, I was like, where am I? Where my car? And I was like, ugh. And I didn't smoke marijuana, so it was like there was like butts in the ashtray of my car, and I didn't smoke. So it was really weird. It was just like that whole day. And it wasn't until like many years later, and my mother's like, "Oh, don't you remember that when the lights were like da da da?" And I was like, "Wait a minute, that was in 97." I was like, "I was there in 97. We were living there." And she's like looking at me like I just spouted another head. And she's just like, "Yeah." And I was like, "No, I don't remember that." And she's like, "Everybody was talking about it. She goes, you couldn't even go to Fry's to like the supermarket and people were talking about it." She was like, "It was on the news.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about it." I was like, I don't remember that.
Well, and what's funny is I had a newspaper clipping of it, and it was like three objects in the sky, and they're like the Phoenix Lights. Now I see videos, and there's like five or six objects in the sky, and I'm like, wait, when did the number change? And I'm like, is this like a Mandela effect? And it's interesting how yours was in the car because I had an experience where I was driving to visit a friend up at college because I wasn't living on campus at the time. And it's like a 45-minute drive. I literally turn the car on, get on one highway, and next thing I know, I'm at her door. And I'm like, this is a 45-minute drive. I have no idea what happened between getting on one highway, having to get on two more to get to where she's at, and finding a parking spot. And next thing I know, I'm like pulling into the parking lot, and I'm like, I don't know what happened, but whoever was driving for me, thank you for not getting me in an accident.
I think I was like in northern Minnesota. I was on a reservation, and it was heavily wooded. And so I'm not driving, I'm the passenger, and I'm like messing around with my phone. And there was like an area on that stretch of road where I would lose signal. So I couldn't, be on my phone, couldn't be on Facebook, couldn't do anything. And I'm like trying to get in as much time as I can before I lose signal. And it was almost like someone said, "Look up." And it was like I put the phone down and I like started looking, in the windshield. And then I like look out and I like look up, and I can see. And at first I think, okay, this is like me at the time. I'm just like, whoa, it looks like a skyscraper, like horizontal. And but it looks like kind of like a futuristic skyscraper because it's kind of like wider at the very end, and it kind of comes to a point. And I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, that thing has to be huge. And oh my God, how is nobody, we're not seeing anybody on the road. And at the time my husband was driving, and I kept telling him, "You need to stop. You need to see this." And he's just like, "It's okay." It was like he was doing everything in his power not to like pull over and look at it. Like he's just like trying to plasticate the crazy woman sitting in the seat next to him. And I'm like, and I'm like, well, I can use my camera on my phone, and I go, like, go up, and we hit this patch of trees, and I don't see it, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I was like, hurry, 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 because I knew there was going to be this break where there was like this beach, and there was like kind of a swamp on the other side of the road from the beach, and there was no trees, so I knew I was going to see it, and we're not that far away, so I'm like, hurry, go, 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 and it's windy, and he's like, So we get there, and pull out, and I like look up. But like the whole time I'm like seeing this thing. And the one thing that they asked me, they were like, "Did it look familiar?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it looked really familiar. It looked like something from Star Wars, like the Republic or the Emperor's
Star
big
Destroyer.
huge slice of cheese in the sky, like a wedge. That's exactly what it was. And I'm like, to this day, I will swear on anybody's grave that that's exactly what I saw. But it was like up in the sky, and it was during the day, like right out in the open. And
I've
and um and by the time we got there, I look up. Finally, I look up, don't see anything. I look straight a little bit up, where if it was going, maybe it sped up. And there's like these weird clouds, like there's normal clouds, and then there's these clouds that kind of darker, and then there's like this weird, I guess I can just say it looked like a portal. That's what it looked like to me,
yeah,
because it looked like the coloring looked different on the other side than what the rest of the sky looked like. And this is going to be the silliest thing, but this will know that I'm not like making weird shit up. It was popping out smoke rings as it was flying. So it's like popping out these huge smoke rings, like poop, poop. And they were kind of widening and then disappearing. And I'm just like, that thing is huge. And it looked like a building. That's how big it was. And I'm like, how is that? There's nowhere to land. And I mean, even if it could, even if it did land, how could it? Because it would, that thing is huge. There's not going to be landing gear big enough to support that thing. So I don't know. I've never really talked about it before
I don't think
because
those
I didn't.
actually land. I think they hover and they build towers and then they extend ramps to them. I don't think I've ever seen
Something.
one actually parked on the ground.
What's funny is you say ramps because I had this weird. It was like, when was it? It was 2012, in the summer of 2012, and I had this. I'm fighting off zombies, and I happen to have my youngest with me at the time was 3, and we were almost on like this weird ramp that was like an escalator, but like everything around us was like, it wasn't deep in the city, but it was kind of like woodsy a little bit. But I wasn't too busy looking at the scenery because I was fighting off all these zombies that were trying to take chunks out of me. And I had my child with me and I have her behind me and I'm like fighting these things and I can't even remember what I had, but I had a weapon. And she happens like, she's like, look, mommy, and she puts her arm out and I'm like, no, and I grab her arm and I yank her back and she's like, no, no, look. She's like, see, they don't want me. They don't like me or something. She said something like that. And they weren't even like recognizing, they weren't even looking at her. She was invisible. And I think I was like, I woke up the next morning and I started like writing, and I got about 20 pages and I want to finish it eventually. It's like, a book, but I mean, it's about 12 years. Eventually I'll get past the 20-page mark, but um yeah, I remember it was like a weird escalator, like a ramp. I didn't see where it was going, but I was like using it to escape, from the ground where the zombies were. And they were like climbing on each other. It was so weird.
Sharing that story, all of a sudden I heard Jacob's ladder and being like, maybe you were on a Jacob's ladder and the zombies were like representing the mainstream like mass consciousness and are and they're like, you're leaving mass consciousness to another level, but they don't want you to go, so they're trying to pull you back down.
Hmm. I don't know because it was like
Uh,
the whole zombies in 2012, because it had something to do with like the Mayan calendar.
yeah, it
Because
was
I
the
actually wrote that
one
into the story.
period and the beginning of another.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also interesting because on a side note is we're talking about Star Wars a lot and Star Trek, is I have memories and I don't know where they come from, and I'm guessing they're somewhat bleed through of the programs, but one memory I have is of fighting a war against AI and being like only select few could actually defeat the AI, but it was never actually truly defeated. And then I remember being like a night where we had lightsabers and fighting and being like, this is against our nature, but we, need to defend. And this was before the new trilogy of Star Wars came out, and I was telling my parents, I said, yeah, there was a point where in the fighting we realized we're never gonna win. We're just expending energy to expand energy. So we took and buried our weapons and kind of went into hiding. And they were like, well, that's interesting. Well, then I find out about the Orion Wars and how they're like Star Wars. And when the last movie of Star Wars came out and they had the big climactic battle scene, and then Rey is on Tatooine, moves the sand and put the lightsabers in the ground and then covered them up. And the lady's like, who are you? And she's like, I'm a Skywalker. I had tears rolling down my eyes, and I go, Mom, that's what I was talking about. We buried the weapon. And she was like, I remember you telling me that. And it was like so weird to see it on film and being like, my whole body and everything was like, I did that. And seeing it, it was like in memory just flooded in. And I'm like, I'll be damned if I could remember where I buried it, but and it's like I wish I had the Thor ability to like summon it back because it'd be so helpful. But
I think the one movie that affected me the most was definitely The Matrix.
oh yeah,
So it was like 1999, and I'm in the movie theater, and not even like I can't even remember. I can't even remember how far we were into it, but I was like, excuse me. And I got up and I went in the bathroom, and I was like, I'm gonna throw up. Like, I seriously felt sick, and it was like, oh my gosh, and it was just like I actually had to just like take quite a few deep breaths and then go and splash cold water on my face because I literally felt like I was gonna puke or pass out or explode, one of the two. But I or three. And I think it was, I think it was what last 2 winters ago. So it'll be three, will it be 3 winters? Yeah, it'll be 3 winters this winter. I remember leaving my apartment. Yeah. I remember leaving my apartment, and there was like a weird portal in the corner of my room. And like I think we were video talking, and like Susan Long was like, "Oh my gosh, is that a portal in the corner of your room?" And I like took pictures of it, and like I was playing with the contrast, and there was this weird stain, but you couldn't see it, normally. But you know, um that night I went to sleep and I dreamt that, well, I wasn't dreaming, but I left through that hole, and I came out above the building, and I was like levitating, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go spin. And so I went, and there was like this main drag that kind of runs all the way downtown, and I started at like 33rd Street, and I went all the way down to, which would be Main, so that was like 33 streets I went, or 33 blocks. And it didn't even take me that long. It was like seconds. But I was like, I can't go that fast because if I go fast, I'm gonna disturb things that are parked along the side of the road. There's street lamps. I mean, I just know. It was like I knew instinctively, just kind of what speed I should go. And I could see, and it was wintertime, so there was like snow, and I could see like the snow spiraling as I was going past, I could see it. And I get there and I'm down by the main street, and it was like 2, 3 in the morning, and it was so beautiful, it was so quiet, so peaceful. And I'm just kind of levitating there, and I was like, you know what? I should get back. I don't want anyone to miss me. So then I just right down straight back where I came. And I'm not flapping my arms. I don't have wings. I don't hear a suit, or I don't hear anything. I don't have any special boots on. I'm just flying on my own. And I can feel it's cold, but it's not like it's like affecting me like it normally would. And then after that I don't know if I got um, landed or whatever, flight restricted. Because I had done another show, and I think it was like with Stephen Popiotek, and he was like, yeah, there's like some sort of grid under your house. And I'm like, yeah. It was the same grid that they put on my wall in my bedroom, because I walked through the brick wall and just flew away. And then after that, I started seeing this weird, it was about 6 inches from the wall on the ceiling. And it was the outside wall that, right above the window. And it was about this much. And I had pictures of it. And it's like this weird stain. And everybody's like, oh, it's from you smoking in your room. And I'm like, dude, I don't smoke, in my room. I don't want anything to smell like smoke. My clothes are in there, my bed, my sheets, everything. No. So it was like, no, it's not that, but I don't know what it is, but it was like a really weird stain. And then I took like this, like a EKG meter that you can use, like electricians use it to like find, live wires in the wall. I was using it on my screen, just the screen. Open the window and touch the screen with it, and it was registering, and it was glowing red and flashing. And I'm like, what? So I went outside and I was like, okay, what's on the wall? Is there like wires? Is there, internet? Is there power wires? What is it? There was nothing out there. And it was like registering along the whole window. And it was flashing red, and it was like saying something was there that was electric. So I don't know. I feel like I got my wings clipped though.
Did once, and it took me a while to get them back. But talking about the Matrix, we were talking behind the screen before the show that yeah, when I'm on the astral plane, when people I hear or sense need help, I'll do what I call the Neo Superman entrance, where I'll either go through the dirt or phase through it and not disturb it, depending on what kind of entrance I want to make. But I'll hit the ground really hard and just stand up and be like, all right, I'm here. What's up? And it's interesting because at first I thought, well, if you make a big enough entrance, whoever, is thinking about something may think twice. But then it's like, I also feel like, well, but it doesn't take a lot of energy to actually do that. And you would look at it and go, okay, if you're tunneling through ground without equipment, you've got to be using a lot of energy. But I've never felt like when I land and make the entrance going, all right, give me a minute, got to catch my breath. I'm like, nope, good to go. Like, doesn't phase me.
I have memories of like being, taking like these huge jumps and just like eh, wherever I was, it was like I could jump for it. It felt like a mile. It was a long way, just keep jump. And then you'd hit the ground and you'd push off again and you would jump farther, and it was really weird. Like I've had astral dreams where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, and it's like almost very lucid. Like, this is what I'm gonna do. And I like just jump in the air and all of a sudden I'm in like anti-gravity, like no gravity. And I'm just like floating around. And I know that I have to push off things. And I'm like worried about being outside of a house because I'm like, I gotta be careful so I don't just knock myself off, you know?
And the thing that's interesting about astral traveling is I was explaining on a interview that I did last night, and it all is by power of the mind and thought, and we don't realize how strong our mind is. And I feel like that's why they splinter our minds is because of how strong and powerful they really are. And when you're in the astral plane, you can take, say, 30 minutes to go from the end of the block and back from your house, or you can do it in 2 seconds or a second. It's all in how your mind is able to accept and be able to understand what's going on and be free and limitless. But at the same time, I feel like there are boundaries. And I don't know if it's because of programming. I just was thinking about this, but I have the ability to go into like shadow realm of the astral plane where people can get caught up and the energy is drained off and they're like being used for food. And I always tell people don't go there. But I innately have the ability to go in. I can find people in there that, like if somebody's calling my name, I can go in, find them, and I can make myself disappear and then appear where I'm needed and be like, hey, this person's coming with me. We can either do this the easy way or the hard way, but I'm leaving. And they're like, go. We don't even want to mess with you most of the time. And so I'm wondering if it's, from the programming that enables us to go in where others can't go and complete missions, so to speak, get out and be like, okay. And they recognize us and leave us alone, so to speak, because they know what we can do.
That I've had a couple guests that were like, I've been in the astral and I see somebody watching me, that just doesn't fit, and they'll go up and be like, what are you doing here? I mean, just say something so random to them and they're like, and then they'll just like gone. And I was like, I've never had that. When I do remember somebody, like I've had a dream, I think it was a couple of years ago, and I remember two people from a different reservation that I worked at for a while. And it was like when I met with them, and I used to work with them, so I know them, their names and everything, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." I instinctively knew that they were like, as far as they weren't like lower ranking, as far as military, they were higher up. Um, and we were all meeting together. And it was really weird because it was like about, I'd say a couple of days after that dream, one of them actually messaged me out of the blue. I was like, hey, you know, and I was like, hey, I was like, oh my gosh, I wasn't gonna say nothing because what if I said, hey, I had a dream about you a couple nights ago, and he was like, weird, I had one about you because that has happened to me before, where I've like, you know, had a dream about someone, all of a sudden, boom, they like call me, and I'm just like, oh my God, I had a dream about you, and they're like, that's why I called you because I had this dream about you too, and it got to be so often that I would, my daughter would call me and I'd be like, so do you have any weird dreams lately? And she was, oh, now that you say so, and she would
Yeah.
go off and start talking about them. And I'm like, I do that, with people, and I get the funniest looks. Because I mean, it was like I had a acquaintance and we were like just kind of hanging out and I mean we had talked, but we had never really, discussed anything, about the program or anything. And I like look at him and I was like, so I was like, you dream about things and they come true, don't you? And it looked like I had just leaned over and pinched him really hard. He just looked at me and I was like, okay, I know that look. You know, I get that look quite a bit. And he was like, I mean, how did you know? And I was like, I don't know. It was really weird. It's just like I just knew. And I don't know how I know these things. Like I'll just pop off something and I don't know how I know something. And then like somebody will get a hold of me days later and they're like, oh my God, the person that you talked to said that what you said exactly how you said happened. So I mean, I've had validation, because yeah, I was thinking, gosh, I wish I knew if that was really gonna happen, and it was like weird. I just get like it's like someone just kind of balls up this letter and just kind of hits me in the head with it, and I'm like, open it and read it, and I say it, and it's true. But I mean, obviously, there is no, there is no paper balled up hitting me. I just, I don't know. And you said that you channel, or you mentioned that you do your own type of channeling.
I did channel for a little while, yeah. I
I'm I'm
Go ahead.
scared. I'm scared to channel. I am. I mean, it's like one of those things where you can do something. Because somebody asked me, I was like, well, I can close portals. And somebody asked me, they're like, well, can you open them? And I'm like, well, yeah, but why?
I know.
Why? Why would you want me to open a portal? They're like,
I'm
but
only a
you can do it.
Cody. I could only close them.
It's like, I, why would you want me to do that? I mean, I'm like, yeah, I'm probably about 95% sure I can. I was like, but why would you want me to? I was like, why? No, there are some things that are just like, mm-mm. And that's one of them. I'm not going to open a portal. Sorry.
That's another thing that I wonder if it's from programming is if it's a natural portal, I'll pick it up and I'll be like, and I can walk up to it and point to it, and people are like, yeah, that's exactly where it is. But if it's a portal that somebody else has opened, I'll walk right into it without even knowing it's there.
I sent it. I used to get like a lot of people that would send me pictures. Um, like if they were having, because I was doing paranormal investigation. I did have a team for a while, but then we disbanded right around, when the scam was going on heavy. And we'll pick it up, but we never did. But I mean, I would get people that would be like, what, I'm having this and this and this. And I'll be like, okay, do me a favor. I was like, take your phone, take video or camera, pictures. I said, pictures are the best. I said, take a picture from the door of the room. I was like, and then take a picture of the closet.
Take
And they're
three.
like, why? And I'm like, I was like, if you notice like archways and in the house, like if you notice entryways, not the ones that are like square, but they're different. Or if you have two mirrors together, I was like, I want to see that energy. I want to, and they were like, how do you know? And I'm like, I feel it. But I also have, um, I would say one of my oldest friends, well, I wouldn't say oldest because that makes it sound like we're ancient, but we went to high school together And we just started we not reintroduce, I can't think, but we just met again online. And this was probably about 5 years ago. And now he does, like, he's been on the show a couple times. And he's from Colorado. He does Oracle Paranormal, and he also studied demonology. So I was like, I wonder if he's ever going to be like, stop sending me this stuff. But I was like, I always want validation. You know, I have this thing. I just send him a picture and see what he has to say, because I have mine written down, or, I have it set to send to him, and I'm just waiting for him to message me back, so, um, but he's just such an amazing psychic and sensitive. And I'm always like, you're so much, more powerful than me. And he just sits there and says, well, I think the same about you. And I'm like, no, I don't think of myself at all.
I can see it.
I, no, I
Uh,
mean,
you'll love this story. I was on a paranormal investigation, and the spirit had asked everyone to leave but me. And so it's just the lady who's speaking for the spirit and I. And all of a sudden, my arm starts to get really hot. And I'm like, well, this is unusual. And I go and I say to the spirit, I said, are you trying to grab my arm? And they go, yes. And I go, you can't grab my arm, can you? And they go, no. And I said, it's burning you, isn't it? And he goes, yes. And we had this little dialogue, and anyone that's investigated with me knows I am not one of those antagonizers or instigators. But in this moment, I was like, all right, this spirit is trying to attach to me. Something's going on and everything. And I was like, all of a sudden, I feel the energy kind of shift. And I go, you're afraid of me, aren't you? And it goes, yes. And I go, you know who I am, don't you? And they go, yes. And I said, and that scares you, right? Yes. And then they were like backing off and were like leaving. And I always thought maybe that's because of my metaphysical background and knowing energy and standing in power. But now that I've become aware of being in the programs, I wonder if they recognized me from a program and realized, oh crap, we just nearly instigated and attached something we do not want to get involved in.
hmm Well, I've always wondered how, like, before going to like a place, and investigating it, how your name will be brought up on like you know, they'll record it on an EVP. And it's like you're not even there yet. It's like, how do they know? I mean, and I think that their world is a lot different than what ours is. Like, just with particles and everything, and being a different plane of dimension, knowledge is something like, breathing. So they have to know, things that, just how we learn things. They can just go into a certain area and just know, you know what I mean? I don't know, because it's like, how do they know these things? I don't
Well,
know.
the other thing that I think about that might, you might consider is time to them flows much differently than it does for us. So as we're arriving, they may have already experienced us being there. And so that's why they're calling out our name and being like, oh, I know you. You were, we already did all of this. And so what we're catching is instead of, actual communication in the moment, we're getting them answering the questions in the past. And that's why they may energetically seem to come faster than others because they've already spent the energy to answer. And it shows up as if they're going right after and going, wow, you got energy to be able to communicate so clearly and so fast. And we don't realize, no, it may be 5 minutes for them, but 30 seconds for us.
Yeah, it's true. Like people are always asking me, I think I had somebody message me and they were asking about, you know, wanting to be able to go back and live in the past. And I guess I didn't understand why one would want to do that, unless you were looking to actively change something.
Well, part of that could also be is society, and we grow up and like our grandparents talk about the golden age, when everything was this or that.
Hmm.
And they make it sound so much better than where we are now. And so people who don't like being in the present are like, yeah, I'd like to go to the past. And I'll always be like, are you sure you want to go back to the past? And they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, well, when would you like to go? And like one person laughingly goes, oh, I think the Old West would be great. And I said, and I go, well, you do realize you're going back to a time when indoor plumbing didn't exist. Bathing would be once a month, maybe.
Once a week if you were lucky.
And no, and that was for everybody. And I didn't have your own room. If you'd be somewhere part time, somebody else would go, and it's hot, dusty, there's no air
Air
conditioning,
conditioning.
and there's no communication. You'd have to ride your horse to the next town to deliver a message. And I'm like, you sure you want to go? And it's like their faces are like going, well, this is not what it looks like in the movies. So no, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm like, yeah, people get false illusions of what different times were like and going, oh, it'd be so great to be a part of that. And I'm like, yeah, that part maybe, but you got to think about all this other part that you're going to be living. And it's like, yeah, it's not so panacea.
Hmm. Yeah, I've had like memories of like wearing almost like 1950s like type clothing, like the full skirts with like the petticoats underneath and like the really big, comb back hair, like big bouffant and stuff. And yeah. Very strange. Like we talk about, you call it astral traveling. Um I mean, we're past the point where, they can convince me otherwise that when we fall asleep that's it. We just stay in our body and everything just kind of, goes to sleep like like your computer when you're not using it. No, that doesn't happen. We leave. The only thing that remains there is the body because the body needs to at least shut down and recharge. And that's why, they call it sleep, but it's just basically your avatar just kind of.
Did you ever see the movie John Carter?
Yes. I
That
actually saw that very recently and I'm like, how did I miss this? How did I miss this movie? It was like I intentionally didn't want to watch it or something.
Yeah, but that the scene in there where he goes to his, I believe it's his nephew, and says, "I've set you up for life. Please make sure my body's not disturbed." And that's why there's no lock on this door, is so that you nobody can come in and disturb me. And I often would say to people before I watch this movie, it's like, hey, if I'm asleep, don't move me, don't disturb me because I'm not going to find myself when I come back because I don't do the whole tying a string. I'm like, you know how messy that would be if you had a string attached to you and you're going all over. You're gonna get caught up in a knot and
Well,
be like,
it's like an umbilicus. It's like when you're in the womb, you are stationed to your body. So I guess it would be like, how they always have like the astronaut out walking, spacewalking, and he's got, an umbilicus tied to the ship so he can't get lost. Well, I mean, it's not real. It's not a real actual. It's almost like a invisible cord that kind of, so you can go far away, as far as you want, but you're still tethered to that astral, or to that earthly physical, physical body or whatever. I think my medicine man was telling me, he's like, he looked at me and it was almost like he was judging me, like if I was gonna, if like what answer I was telling him, like he was gonna know if I was lying or not. And I'm a horrible liar anyway, so I'm just like, okay. And he's like, do you leave your body at night? And I go, yes. And he's looking at me, judging me to see if I'm telling him the truth. And he goes, when he's like, the best thing for you to do, he's like, is take your medicine bag. He's like, and hang on to it. He goes, if you're gonna leave, make sure that you protect your body while you're not in it, because there are so many things that would love to just have control and possession of your body. And I think my ex-husband was also a dream walker too, and he was Native American, and he was like, I was out. He's like walking around. He's like, those, it was like there was like a pathway, like an old road. He's like, but it wasn't paved or anything. He's like, I'm walking. He's like, in on each side of me. He's like, they couldn't touch me, but I could hear them. And I was like, who? And he was demons. He's like, I could hear them on either side of me. And he was like, and I was told, he's like, an ancestor told me, he's like, stay on the path. You'll be fine as long as you stay on the path. Just don't go over there. Don't go over there. So I mean, every night I would like have I'd had just kind of tuck my medicine bag, and I have a soft exercise bra, I would tuck it in, or else my jammies or my pants pocket, and I would, because I don't know. I guess I'm more traditional than I think I am, because he also told me, he's like, you can't get lost.
I wouldn't say more traditional. I just think more aware because, yeah, I don't, I leave protection on my body when I'm off world going, if something comes, you know, this shielding's going to activate or my body's going to react this way and it's going to make it extremely uncomfortable. So whatever's in there is going to leave. Like, I may be like, say, normal temperature is like 100, and something comes in and is like, man, you know, this is nice. It's nice having a body. I'm like, well, the body may start to heat up to 105, 106. And whatever's in there is like, okay, this is way too hot, uncomfortable. I'm out. And I'll come back and I'll be like, nothing's here. All right, I'm back. All's good. And, or, like little things like that. And one thing that I found interesting doing Reiki work was I would see someone, on the table, and in my mind, I'm like going, well, it's going to take me a while to work on this spot, this spot, this spot, this spot, this spot. There's so many spots that I was like, all right, energy form. And it's like I would see myself and it would like splinter and it would go into their body and then it would go out and return to me. And I'd kind of brush myself off and be like, all right, let go of everything that was theirs. send it back to wherever it's going, source. But then I would scan the person again, and all of the things were gone. And I was like, perfect. And, I never thought about, you know, how I would even think to do that and think that, it was something safe and okay to do. But yeah, it's interesting how when we just let go, things happen and what we expect to happen doesn't happen.
Yeah, that was well, see, before I actually started studying um through Reiki with a master, I was laying hands, like hands-on healing on people. And I think that was like also too, I had talked to my medicine man. He's like questioning me and he's like, well, how do you feel pain? And I was like, on someone else. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, it's a heat. I feel it. It's like heat. And he was like, hmm. And I was like, oh, well, that's the wrong answer. And he's like, there are no wrong answers. And I was like, okay. He's like, but it's funny that you say that. And he's like, are you having issues with that? And I said, well, kinda. I was like, because it's like I to heal somebody, it's almost like I step into their body and then step out, and then like whatever is hurting them hurts me on my body. So that's how I know where to focus. I know they say that, you can put your hands on anywhere and, it'll go where it's meant to go. But I just feel like it's more intense when I can, find the spot, and I think it was a friend of mine. She was helping me, because I was practicing. And um, she's like, sure. She's like, I just got home. And I was like, well, get comfortable and I'll start. And like, I have to meditate and pray. And I was like, and then I'll text you and let you know when, I'm going to start. And she's like, okay. So then, I did everything I needed to do and I started. And then when I finished, she was like, she didn't hear nothing from her. And I was like, oh, sometimes people fall asleep. So about 20, 30 minutes later, she's like, oh my gosh, I fell asleep. She's like, and I was like, I was like, um, your left foot. I was like the back of your foot. Like, because when I have the like this Reiki doll and I noticed on the foot. And she was like, yeah, she said she had to have surgery on her Achilles tendon. And she goes, I didn't tell you which one it was. And I was like, no, you didn't need to. And um, I guess she had lupus. And I was like sitting there, and I was like, my back is like on fire. And she's like, oh, I gotta check. I'll be right back. And I was like, check what? What are you checking? And she came back and she's like, that was another thing I didn't tell you. She said, I have lupus. And she's like, and she gets like these lupus spots on her back. And she said, when I got home, there were 6 of them on my back. And she said, and when I woke up and I just checked now, she said, I only have 2. And I was like, well, my whole back feels like it's on fire. Like I was, held in a position for a very long time. And you know how your back aches. That's how it felt, but it was like literally on fire. And so, I mean, she was like a non-believer, but I told her, I was like, just keep an open mind. I was like, that's all you have to do. You don't have to believe in it. Just keep your mind open, just totally open. And, to do that, she fell asleep. But, um, there are people, I've worked on people that are just non-believers in Reiki and just weird thing, I had somebody that had a cyst on their back and I worked on them and I was like, just keep an open mind. And a couple days later, I checked in with them and I was like, so how are you? Um, oh yeah, it's gone. And I was like, you didn't think to call me and tell me this. I would have liked to have known, but it's things like that. Even not just healing, but people that are, having anxiety. I like to work with people that have PTSD, just, mirrors a lot of issues that I have, which is trauma, PTSD. I've worked with animals. So I love working with dogs. Like, even doing remote, they even react to that. At first they're kind of like startled, especially when I start. They kind of, because it's like, how can someone be in the room if nobody's in the room, But I like to use like dolls. Like I have a Reiki doll with like the chakras on it. And I have like a little dog doll that I use. And yeah, it it fulfills me. So, because that was one of the things with recovering and being sober, was that, you have to give back. And so that's what I've been doing for like 8 years. Is giving back. And it's like, it's never going to be like, is this enough? Is this enough? It's never a thing. It's a lifestyle change. It's, continuously helping people, and getting over the anger, because I mean, especially driving, I have to drive on the freeway every day to work, from, back home. And I just get so angry because, people just drive like maniacs. And it's gotten to the point where I have to like look at the car and be like, I have to pretend that, my kid's in that car, driving that car. And I'll be like, next time use your signal. I mean, I have to, because I get so angry, and it's like, I can't allow myself to like lower my vibration, and then people hate that when you say vibration or frequency. I don't know why it's such a trigger, but yeah, it is. It is. Like, why they say, you're vibing high, you're in a great mood. But if you're like, oh man, I'm just low vibes today, and you feel bad. So people do say that, you know. I think that is perfectly normal, for frequency and vibration. And that's, it's going to come where we're not going to have medical doctors and hospitals and pharmaceutical companies anymore. It's going to be all about frequency, vibration, med beds, um, regen, things like that. I mean, that's going to be the wave of the future.
You can see a cake that will fix everything.
No, 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 no.
I
We're
those.
we're. Oh, sorry, you're breaking up. I thought you paused. We're here for, a human experience. We're here to know not what to do when we're placed, because I feel like a lot of the times, and I think it was with the guest that was here the last weekend, it was, you know, what not to do, because, as immortals, we're going to find ourselves, either in charge or, off seeding our own planets. And how are we going to run them? Well, we're looking at firsthand what not to do.
Yeah,
So we're gonna have to learn from that. That's what we're here for. This is like a boot camp, but I've also heard it called a prison planet, and I
teaching planet.
mm, and I mean, I always get a lot of people that come up to me and they're like, well, I don't recognize you. And I'm like, well, I didn't look like this. I was, I have distinct memory of seeing this mirror and be like, you know what? I'm gonna check, make sure my hair isn't crazy, And I walk over to the mirror and I am just completely, my hair is like silver blonde, my skin is very pale, my eyes are very light. I remember thinking, because I'm used to like a lot of color in my skin, and I did not have any. It was like the wall behind me, and it was like such a shock. um so I didn't look like this, These are our avatar bodies, to be here. We're all, I mean, the CIA already said that we're, totally like holographic
in shows.
simulation. And regardless on whether it's a round plane of existence or a flat plane of existence, it's something to keep people arguing. So
Yeah,
what? It's either or, it's both, or it's none of the above. So what?
yeah.
Just, who doesn't matter if who's right, who's wrong. The
No,
fact that,
it cracks me up because I'm like, when the flat earthers are like, it's flat. I'm like, well, every time I've seen it from space when I'm up there, it's pretty round, but I can't argue with them and saying, well, I've seen it round because they're like, are you an astronaut? No. Well, then how did you see it round? It's like they're not open enough to go, oh, you're in the programs and you were in space. Okay, cool.
oh
And it's
yeah.
like, I just swallow my tongue and I'm like, okay, you think it's flat? That's cool, but I've seen it
uh,
round, so
I can honestly say that I have no memories of looking and seeing what it looks like. But I mean, I have had a guest that has come on, and when he was leaving, his CO said, "Did you see what it looked like?" And he's like, "No." So he goes to the window and he looks out, and he said it's shaped like a donut, it's shaped like a red blood cell. And that's what I get to. It's almost like, the metaphysical field, around a human being is, this planet is sentient. Why wouldn't it have that? Why wouldn't it have that field? You know, whether it be physical or spiritual, why wouldn't it? And I know that this planet, I know this planet is real. I mean, this is something that I was told as a child. This is something we learned growing up on the reservation, growing up that, that mother was real. I mean, even when you have ceremonies and you put up a ceremonial tent, the tent is very round, very shaped like a womb, like a belly of mother. You go in and you come out and you're reborn. I mean, that's how I was taught to look at it, and everything, have respect for everything. If you have to kill an animal for food, you pray and you put out something in exchange. You
and
know,
even looking at like they call the Earth, the turtle, like Mother Turtle, the turtle shells are domed, but if you look at the bottom, some of them are flat, some of them have a bump, so it could be circular or it could be a dome half, and but I've never seen a flat turtle. And so
well,
it,
some of those snapping turtles, I remember my nephew had one. That thing was flat. It was it wasn't really hard either. It was like white and kind of squishy. But
I
we talked
wonder,
about that.
yeah,
That was the old calendar that they used back in the day, was because there are 13 those little different spots on a turtle's back. There's 13. No matter which turtle you get, there's going to be 13. And they used that. So there was like 28 days per month, and there were 13 months. I don't know how that worked. I'm still thinking about it, but I guess.
yeah, there was originally 13 months on our calendar system, but then the Romans came in and were like, no, we're Xing out a month. And then somebody else came in and was like, well, we're gonna change the months to this now. And every 4 years to make up for the fact that we're missing a day is how they calculated it out. We have the leap year. And that extra day in the leap year is what sets the calendar time correct of the number of days in that cycle. And I'm like, how can we, with changing calendars, changing time zones, ever think any of what we've been taught time wise, whether it's a clock, years, centuries, ever be correct, because everything's been altered.
Oh
So
yeah.
you go to BC and we're like, okay, yeah, so in June BC this happened. Well, how do we know that was June? Because it was altered calendar. And we no longer are counting the 13th month. So we've lost a certain chunk of time. So yeah, it's like I'm like that can't be accurate because we're not accounting for this, or how are you accounting for that? And nobody has answers for that.
Hmm. And that's the thing, like every single civilization, society, religion talks about this great flood. And like I actually learned about that and through like stories that we learn through the stories of creation with like he's a character, well, not character, but his name is Nana Buju. And he's kind of like a little trickster boy, and he like goes and he learns all these things and they put him in these stories. But it was it had rained and like there was water everywhere. And so Nanabuju found himself in a boat, and he found there was a turtle swimming along, so he pulled him in, and there was other animals, and he pulled them into the boat, and he was like, if we were able to get, soil, we could put it on turtle's back, and we could have like land. And so all the animals tried to dive. So Otter tried first, and he's like, I can do it. And he went down. He didn't make it. He came back up. And then Loon tried, and Loon went down, and he came back. He almost died. And he was like, well, I can't do that. And so Muskrat was like, I'll do it. So then he dove, and he was gone for a long time. And they thought, oh, and they started feeling really sad because they realized that he had lost his life trying to save theirs. And finally his body just floated up, and they went over and they picked him out of the water, and in his hand he had like soil. So he had made the bottom somehow. So they took this, Nanabuju took the soil and he put it on Turtle's back. And Turtle just like all of a sudden started to grow like this land. Like it was like this big, huge island. And it was Turtle Island. But see, that was the thing. It's like we talk about that in, I think it was in like one of the previous shows about at one point all of this land was all together. It was Turtle Island. It was all one, but somehow it split with all these earthquakes and movements and, exactly what's going on now. I mean, it's going to change. And then, of course, what they represent on maps and on the globe is not, you know, exactly the correct size. They make something bigger, something smaller. It would just be nice not to be lied to every day of our lives. That would be like one wish.
One of the things that's interesting is, like you're talking about the Turtle Island, and I was just thinking about, modern science calls it, Eastern, well, I shouldn't say Eastern, but Western science that's not the indigenous science calls it Pangea. And they say, yeah, everything just drifted apart. And I can't help thinking, okay, if we look at it symbolically, we're all one. You have Turtle Island, Pangea, whatever you want to call it. But then they taught us separation. Well, what happens? Now we have North America, South America, isolated. We have Europe, Asia, partially isolated. You have Africa, partially isolated. Australia's isolated. So you have the separations that we were taught. then what is eventually going to happen is that people don't realize is, okay, so North America is floating away from Europe. Well, what's going to happen? It's going to crash into Asia and rejoin there. Well, then what's going to happen with the Australia? It's floating and moving. It's going to pick up probably New Zealand and a bunch of the islands, reconnect. So we're actually, as separated, we're eventually going to become whole again. And the planet is going to become one mass again. And I feel like Mother Earth or Gaia or whatever name you want to give her was like, I'm going to give you guys the ultimate visualization and show you you don't have to worry about how long this is going to take because it's going to happen. And when we think about it's been what, 40, 50,000 years since the split, and how much ground is between the two, and how we're getting close to the other side. Like, so Australia is really close to Russia, so they're going to collide sooner than the others. And it's like, time wise, it doesn't matter how fast or slow we go, it's still going to happen. We can't stop it. It's not like we can stop everything from moving, and new land grows. And I feel like that is not necessarily new land growing. I think it's just the earth saying, look, here's, another piece that you guys didn't realize was here. And here's another example of we're connecting, and there's going to be land bridges returning. And so to me, it's like, yeah, we're living in a symbolic visualization of what we are meant to do as a people. The land is matching us. And so as we're unifying and embracing our togetherness, the lands are coming together.
Yeah, if we can keep everybody on the same page and not fighting over just things that are, distraction, like this whole Olympic thing, the Olympics. I mean, I haven't even watched it. I don't have any interest in anything that happens on television. Like anything that happens, like the whole thing with the Oscars and with Will Smith and Chris Rock. I made a few memes about it, but I mean, I didn't even see it.
I
I don't watch any of that.
I'm real selective on what I watch, and I haven't watched anything about the Olympics other than what people will post and saying, "Oh, did you see this or did you see that?" And even then, like, they were talking about some rituals exposed in the opening ceremonies, and I'm like watching and going, "If you say so." I don't see
Hmm.
it, but then again, that's not what I'm looking for. And I grew up in the metaphysics, and one of the and this will go back to your story with your husband, in the car looking at the UFO, is, and it's actually funny because she uses a UFO in the example, is she was asked, how come, this, they don't come and just land and say hello? Why, all this secrecy and everything? And she goes, okay, so take a group of 100 people. Half of the people are believers and will walk outside and see a UFO hovering above the ground, say 30 feet, and be like, wow, check out that UFO. I'm betting, it'd be really nice if the beings came out and said hello, and be open to it. The other half of those are skeptical and are like, well, maybe. So they may see a fuzzy image and not understand what it is. and then the ones that are left are the non-believers, and they're going to go out and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Even though there's bright orange, blue UFO say out there that you couldn't possibly miss, and even say showing strobe lights and everything, making itself as obvious as it can, they won't see it because their mind will not accept it. And so she says you have to watch what your mind, where you're at in your life. If you are shut down and anti any idea about this, it'll never happen for you. If you're on the fence about it, you may or may not see it. If you're open to it, you'll get the whole experience. Everybody is where they are meant to be. There's nothing wrong with being in any one of those categories. It's just where you are. That's what you have to look at. And I thought that was the best way to explain even the paranormal, why some people have experiences, some don't. They're in the same place, same time, but
I
why?
hadn't, yeah, I had an experience when I was 19. I think you'd like this because it's definitely up that whole paranormal alley. But I was like 19. I was driving my boyfriend at the time and one of our friends. We went to the movies, we hung out. I was driving him home about 20 miles away from the town that I lived in. And this is like northern Minnesota. And it was about, they had a curfew of like, I think it was like 12:30. And so it's about midnight. I was like, I can make it in 30 minutes. And there was two ways. I could take the freeway and go 70, or I could take the back roads and go faster, but there's deer and possibly cops both ways. So I was like trying to figure out which way do I want to go? Which way do I go? And I'm pulling up with the car and I'm kind of slowing down because I was going to take a left and take the back roads. And I look and there's like a hitchhiker standing a little bit right past the road where I had to turn on the other side. I had to take a left. This person was on the right side of the road. And I noticed it was like summertime and this person's like wearing like layers. So I'm thinking, maybe homeless. And maybe she's got to be somewhere. So she's leaving, town because she's right on the edge of town. And she like makes contact with me through the car. And when it's dark and the windshield, you can't see into someone's car. I mean, I can't. I don't know. But she makes eye contact with me. And immediately, as soon as I look at her eyes, she starts to smile. But it just doesn't stop. It doesn't stop at a normal smile. It keeps getting bigger and bigger, and her jaw just drops. And I see these teeth that are about this long, top and bottom. And I'm just like, oh, I can't even say anything. And I can't say nothing to my boyfriend or the passenger because I'm just in shock. And all of a sudden, everybody freaks out in the car. Like my boyfriend's like, "Oh my, do you see your teeth? Do you see your teeth?" And he's hitting me, like, "Oh my God, oh my God." And I'm just like, because I'm seeing it. They're seeing it. The friend in the back is seeing it. And I just floor it and I just shoot past her. And I'm scared. I'm like, I'm not driving home by myself. I think I ended up spending the night on my boyfriend's mom's house on the couch or something. But that was like at that point, that was the most terrifying thing that I'd ever seen.
So you took the turn anyway?
I kept going straight.
I was gonna say that's probably was a spirit saying you don't want to go this way because you were undecided. So they're like guiding you, going, take the safer route, take the safer route.
Well, I think I was like, I had a psychic medium on. I think it was Daniel Jackson. And he was like, I told the story online because I always wanted to know what I saw and was that real? And I was kind of shooting him things, that I needed, validation. And he goes, she knew, she knew that you were gonna see her. That's why she did that. And I was like, okay, but how did everybody in the car see it? And they were like, he said, because of you, because they were close enough to you He goes, it's almost like, you have this ability to be able to have other people witness the things that you see as long as they're in close proximity to you. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense why they all saw it. But, would I have seen it if I was by myself? No, I don't think I would have been out at 12:30 at night.
You were out and about, maybe, but probably you wouldn't have been. And what's interesting is I have the innate ability sometimes if I'm connected to someone on a true level where, like they were saying, they saw it because of you, is say, for example, you and I, if we were, talking on the phone, I'm in Texas, you're, where you are, so we're not remotely close. But if you're like, oh my God, something's going on, I can, in my mind, go, okay, what's going on? And I can start to see what you're seeing.
I do that
And
too.
I was like, I've only been able to do that a few times, but it's like, it's really weird when you start to see through other people's eyes and being like, okay, this is what I'm witnessing, and being like, oh, wait, so this is how they see the world? And it's like, yeah, this is interesting. And I've often wondered, though, when you separate, is there any residual? Like, do you leave an imprint or a mark or something that, you know, or anything? Or is it a clean separation?
I don't know. Well, it's somebody that had a Mandela effect, like if you remember Elton John, there are some people that remember that he passed away, and there are some people that like remember him still alive. And so I was talking with a former friend of mine who had like I remember the funeral, and I was like it was a glass coffin. I was like it was like where the royals when they get married, the carriage, that big long huge you know where they bring the carriage down this big long road or street, and everybody's standing 10, 12, 20 feet back, and and there were yellow roses on the coffin. And he goes, "Oh my God, you remember it too?" And I was like, "No, I don't." And he's like, "Well, how did you know?" And I was like, "I don't know. Just at that moment, I saw what you saw." I was like, he's like, "You described it to the T." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I was seeing it through your eyes. I was able to you were thinking of it. I pulled up the memory and I just explained it to you what I was seeing." That's it. It was funny though, because he was like, "You remember that?" No, but no, my memory is he's still alive. I said I have no recollection of any funeral of Elton John. So like things like that, like we were talking about Mandela effects, and could it be, you know, jumping timelines
I
and
think it
things that
is.
happen differently in different timelines?
I think it is. And a friend of mine in Colorado, made the observation that our timelines are merging. And so whichever timeline is more prevalent of certain facts is the one that takes over. And so that's where he thinks all these Mandela effects are increasing now is because we have, you could have a timeline where, say, JFK was never shot and became president. And it's like so strong. And you're going to be like, what do you mean JFK was assassinated? And it's like, he wasn't assassinated in the car. He died of, on a boat, years later. And it's like, you can't tell them that they're wrong. you can't refute it because it's so in them, and it's like, and I think that's what's going to become the like main issue for people as we're merging everything and becoming back into one. And even us, with our alters, living timelines, we're merging with them, and it's like, wait a minute,
Memories.
how, this and this is different, and but I remember this differently, but now I remember it this way, and it's like a major Mandela effect for me that I noticed recently is having the moon up during the day. I remember totally being taught in school the moon is the symbol of the night and it only rises at night. And the sun is the only celestial object during the day. So we have day, night. That's how you tell the difference. And I was walking one day and I looked up and there was the moon, plain as day, full moon, middle of the day. And I'm like, wait a minute, the moon is not supposed to be up during the day. When did this happen?
Really? Because I remember seeing the moon during the day. You'd sometimes like not all day, but there would be certain times where you would see it. Like I could see it like in the mornings, like especially when I wake up early and I go to work early, I'll see it when it's getting light out. Um, I think one of the because I've never had a Mandela effect ever. So I was like, I was hearing these people and I was just thinking, oh, you guys are just like, making something out of nothing. Well, I think it was like earlier this year I actually had one. So I'm a huge Janis Joplin fan. And her song, Me and Bobby McGee, sang, and I've always sang this song the exact same way. She's in the very beginning, she was like, Bobby flagged a diesel down just before it rained. But the new songs, and it's even on my playlist on Amazon, if you pull it up and you look, it's Bobby thumbed a diesel down just before it rained. And I was like,
Yeah,
I was even singing it flagged, and I was like, well, you don't flag a diesel down. I mean, you don't thumb a diesel down, you flag a diesel down. I was like, what is going on? And I pulled up some old, I would think it was like on DuckDuckGo, and I pulled up lyrics to Me and Bobby McGee sang by Janis Joplin, and it is flagged, but everything is changed to thumbed. And I'm like, it's so weird.
yeah. Another one that I found that cracked me up was a lady took a photo of a receipt from Fruit of the Loom, and their logo has the cornucopia on it. And she wrote the letter to Fruit of the Loom and said, how come you guys got rid of your logo with the cornucopia? And she shows their letter saying, ma'am, we have never had a cornucopia in our logo.
And
And she's
she's like,
like,
BS.
here's your receipt. There's a
There's
cornucopia. And it's like, and I've often wondered, that brings up, an interesting mind warp concept of if I have an alter that, you know, say is an author, wrote many books, and I merge with him, do I get those books? Do those books carry over and become my property? And I have all of a suddenly a library of books attributed to me? Or do those books disappear because that part of me disappeared into me? And so it's like, can things transfer that are tangible objects between the timelines?
I think it depends on how many people actually recollect these books. Like people, like if it's like a pretty popular line of books, it's gonna, that many people remembering it is going to be there. But I mean, if it's just like, say, a line of books that they created but never published and nobody knew about them, it's quite possible that they would, you know, like, how people can manifest things. I
Right.
mean, if people know enough about it, you know, I don't know. It's really weird. Like if you go back to the previous episode, like right before the one that you're going to have, they talked about the we talked about the holographic matrix, the simulated matrix, and the Phoenix phenomenon, and how, it's like we're like almost like a video game type energy. So that would mean, that would mean it's quite possible that we're, the simulation doesn't make adjustments for the curvature of the earth, you know. Or else, like I was like talking about the camping trip and going, not making any plans and then just showing up at this camping spot, and there's this little military guy on my picnic table, and I had zero plans. I just like threw it up in the air and I ended up where I ended up, and then when I showed up there was like nobody there. So it was like really weird, but I was like trying to make contact with like Sabe, with like Bigfoot. And it was funny, it was like the first night there, it and like the inside of the tent is all these different colors, and my sleeping bag is blue. But when I went in, I had my light on. I went in and like everything was black and white and gray. It was really weird. And I like looked at my phone, and my phone was like someone had touched it and like made it all electricity. And it was like bright. I could barely stare at it. And I'm just like, what the heck is going on here? And it was like almost like I was like in a different weird dimension. I don't know. I kind of felt like he was around, but he didn't make his presence known, or I don't recall having that presence. But I felt very like I was being watched. And I remember there was like that first night I looked out in the woods and I just happened to catch like this really big red orb. And I was like, well, that's weird. And I looked back at it and it was gone. But it was like, I asked my guides, I was like, was that him? Was he like in an orb type thing? And they were like, yeah, that's how he gets around. And I'm like, okay. Sometimes I don't know about myself.
Yeah. I want to travel by road. It'll save gas money.
For real. Actually, here
Plane
gas is
ticket,
going down a
just
little
think
bit.
about it. You don't have to pay for plane ticket or bus or any kind of travel. You just turn into an orb and float over.
That's the thing. I mean, I can fly. Why won't they let me fly? I mean, can you imagine how much I'd save? The only
Oh,
thing is I'd have to bring everything that I need with me, you know?
yeah. It's funny that you say you can fly. It's to me, I'm like always talking about traveling by the speed of thought, and so I'm like, yeah, think myself in say the UK and be there just as fast. And it's like, man, I'll always catch myself because I'll be like ready to go, and then I'm like, I'm still here, and I'm like, oh, that's right, I'm not on the other side.
That's called teleportation. No. But what was it? I was like, no. I was kind of interacting with this group, and it was kind of like the glitches in the matrix type thing. And people were like, whatever energy we're in, people are talking about their cats teleporting. And like I don't know, my cat was like communicating with me, and I'm like, all right, now I officially feel crazy because I said my cat told me. He's like, all cats have portals in that spot right above their eyes. And it was like, did you say something? I was like, okay, I've gone in, I've been tested. They said I'm not schizophrenic. I might have them retest me, but and like it's really weird because people are like saying that they just passed their cat in the hallway. They only have one cat. And the next thing you know, the cat is in front of them, locked into a closet in a room with the door shut. So how did that cat get in there? People are like, vents. And they're like, we don't have vents like that. Like you can't, there's no way. I just passed him, and all of a sudden, how did he get by me? And if he did a vent, there's no vents in the closet. So how did he get in the closet if there's no vent, exit there? So I remember seeing something. A friend of mine was having an issue with a cat being let out. And I was like, well, what if, what if they can teleport? So then I'm thinking about, well, what if we can teleport, And I think that's my youngest is like that. So you never know. I think that there's like a whole, we're set for like a jump in like human evolution. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Like right now we're experiencing it, like signs, symptoms, but it's going to be a huge jump and there ain't nothing that they can do about it. It's just going to happen. It's like all the crazy stuff that they've been trying to do for like the last, I don't even know how many years to turn things around. It's not working in their favor. If anything, they're just burying themselves deeper. My thoughts. Anyway. Well, I hate to say this, but we have been going for almost 2 hours. So somehow we managed to jump ahead in time to because it didn't feel like 2 hours at
No
all.
kidding.
No. And I was like, we're gonna keep it about an hour, and that doesn't work. Um, it didn't with your show. We tried. Um, but I really appreciate you coming on such short notice. I had an amazing time on your show, and I wanted to make that experience for you here too. So hopefully it did.
You did. I
Did
had a
it?
great time, and yeah, I'm like surprised at the time and going, yeah, I thought, okay, yeah, this will be our show. Sure, this will be fun, and I enjoyed her on my show. So great conversation, and I looked at the clock and I was like, oh my God, how did
You
2 hours?
didn't believe me when I said 2 hours, did you? You were like, no, you're wrong. Hasn't been 2 hours, but it has.
Oh, I just started thinking 2 hours. How do I let Eve know? Wow, it's been 2 hours, and then you go, oh, hey, it's been 2 hours. And I was like, oh, good. She got the telepathy.
I have been hearing things like that's what I said. Maybe I should go and get tested because I was like, I heard somebody's voice, like very familiar voice, and I was like, they were muted. So there was no way that they said anything. And I heard it in my headphones. I thought I heard it in my headphones. And then there was the cat. And then my kid said was like, I walked away, the door was shut, and it was like I heard what in my ear, like she was standing right there. And I was like, whoa. And I like looked and I was like, I just heard my kid like right in my ear, but the door was shut. So I don't know. I some things are kind of bleeding through right now. Um, I get a lot of people that sit there and tell me to, they're like, get out of my head. And I'm like, I'm not trying. I'm not seriously not trying. Maybe you should control your thoughts so I don't hear them. You know, I don't know. I don't think it works that way, but we'll figure it out. And all of this is just remembering because these are not abilities that we're learning. These are abilities that we already have, and we're just remembering how to use them. So, well, you know, that's what I think anyway. I don't know if it's 100% true, but all right. So we are going to close up shop tonight. So I want to thank Michael for coming on tonight. I will get my butt on those promos because I know I'm running behind on everything. So thank you so much for coming on tonight. I appreciate it. And I'll be sure to send you the link so you can post this because I got the thing on Facebook where you were like, I need the link. I was like, when it comes out, definitely. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you.